everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to this important event. I'm really grateful to see you all here supporting this cause that really means so much to me and my family. Losing my brother to suicide has been the most devastating thing I've ever experienced. In the case of suicide, the manner of death can sometimes overshadow the person's life. But those who knew Skylar well vividly remember countless ways that he touched and improved our lives. We leaned on him in so many ways, and he was the expert we relied on when we needed guidance about computers or cars, outdoor activities, relationships, and so many other things. He made us laugh like no one else ever could or ever will again. He was really quick-witted and adventurous and thrill-seeking, the kind of guy that wanted to feel the wind in his face. He loved biking and motorcycles and spending time outdoors. He was an amazing strategic thinker and salesman who was smart, competitive, thoughtful, artistic, spiritual, loved his vinyl music collection, and was an avid reader. He was fierce and stubborn, but also very sensitive and intuitive, generous and loyal to a fault. He was an incredible and very proud dad and stepdad. He had overcome a tremendous amount of adversity and trauma in his life, including being a witness at the tender age of 4 to our older brother Stephen's accidental death by electrocution. This makes the way that we lost him seem even more tragic and senseless to us. So 2 days after my birthday, on the 4th of July, 2018, my brother had the absolute worst day of his life. Desperately seeking a path out of years of physical and emotional pain in a bipolar hypomanic episode exacerbated by alcohol, he acted impulsively and shot and killed his fiancée and then himself. The next day, I had the absolute worst day of my life when my dad delivered the shocking news to our family. I really felt like I had been shot too, shot through with a million emotions simultaneously. How could we lose 2 people who we love so dearly at once in such an unthinkably horrific way? I still can't wrap my mind around it fully, and I likely never will. I have so many questions as to why and how the loving man I knew so well could have done something so shockingly out of character. Even 14 months after his death, there are times when I feel like he's just out of town on a business trip or on a vacation. But then the memory of what happened snaps sharply into focus, and a wave of grief and regret hits me again. There are what-ifs that haunt me, memories of experiences we shared, and endless wishing that there was something I could have done or said to have prevented what happened, even though I know in my logical mind that there really wasn't. His life cannot be summed up by his last gut-wrenching moments. He was much more than the mental illness that triggered his mind to think that there was no other way to escape his situation. Every day, I wish he had not ended their lives. I wish he understood in that instant that death was a painfully permanent decision that would intensely affect all those who loved them both. Yet tragically, that day cannot be undone, and bullets cannot be unshot. Souls cannot be stuffed back into bodies, no matter how much we wish they could. I often find my mind desperately striving to make sense of a senseless situation and discover a higher meaning in all the chaos. Initially, I really struggled constantly with feelings of shock, anxiety, anger, guilt by association, confusion, deep sadness. And while those emotions have softened a bit over the last year, they arise surprisingly frequently still. Every holiday and birthday and anniversary bring with them a sense of dread, not knowing what emotions will arise to the surface. Social media is constantly throwing up memories and photos of them in my face with no warning, and I can't predict when something like a song playing on the radio or driving by a place I associate with him will trigger a flood of tears or an attack of anxiety. It's really hard not to go into panic mode when someone asks me if I have siblings. Should I mention just my living sibling or tell them I have 2 dead brothers? Should I say that he died and just leave it at that? Or do I tell him he died by suicide? Or tell him that he took someone else's life too? I'll always love and miss him fiercely, but I also still feel really angry and hurt by what he did. I hate what his last actions did to his fiancée, to her family, to our family, his kids, and to himself. Their violent deaths had the effect of an emotional grenade going off in our lives. Family roles and responsibilities have shifted in unexpected ways. And now we all deal with deep feelings of abandonment and a more acute fear of losing the ones that we love in unforeseen and sudden ways. After experiencing the trauma of suicide loss, my natural tendency was to isolate and distance myself from others and from life, and to stifle any hint of joy or happiness. I pushed away people and returned to work really shortly after the memorial service and spent as much time alone as I could. I just wanted some time and space to process what had happened, but eventually I realized that isolation didn't encourage resilience in me. In fact, it amplified my suffering. It allowed and encouraged me to vacillate between wallowing in and denying my pain, and made me believe the lie that feeling better would be a betrayal to their memories. Ultimately, isolating myself prevented me from really connecting with friends, family, mental health professionals, and others who could have helped me better cope with my stress and sadness earlier on in my grief. When I allow myself to accept help and comfort from others, by sitting with someone in silence, receiving a caring hug, talking to a friend, or even just accepting a compassionate look in the eyes from someone, I find profound moments of healing that cultivate a feeling of understanding and true belonging between souls. Our culture's unspoken expectation is that we should emerge from our allotted grieving period about a year at most, as newly enlightened creatures full of wisdom about the meaning of life, or just at least stop talking constantly about our distress. I used to think that way too, but a long stint on the inside of heartbreak has dramatically changed my point of view. I've learned that grief is not a set of stages that you buzz through, and there's no checklist or timeline. It's really messy and complicated and unique to each situation. After experiencing such a significant and devastating loss, I felt as though a huge piece of myself was missing and my identity was turned inside out. I was unsure of my place in the world, and my sense of safety was shattered. In order to move toward a hopeful future, I started the process of reconstructing my sense of self and reclaiming my purpose. The critical beginning of that was just realizing that I don't want my grief to define me. I don't want to diminish or dismiss the tremendous loss in any way, but at the same time, I must figure out a strategy to integrate my grief into my life. I found some inspiration in the words of Jerry Sitzler from his book, A Grace Disguised, How the Soul Grows Through Loss. He says, the experience of loss does not have to be the defining moment in our lives. Instead, the defining moment can be our response to the loss. It's not what happens to us that matters so much as what happens in us. I'll share with you that my keys to finding the strength to thrive after loss are seeking connection and community. I need to connect with others who validate and empathize with me and understand my experience and emotions. I really need my tribe to support me. What's helping me the most in this process is leaning into the loving arms of Jesus, my Savior, and growing closer to Him through prayer and meditation on His Word. I'm looking for my identity, guidance, and solace in the Lord, the only one who can offer me true peace and mend my broken heart. I also really rely heavily on my church and spiritual community for support and comfort. Counseling from an empathetic and well-trained therapist really helps me immeasurably, allowing me to work through and express fully my range of emotions and thoughts. It's an absolute necessity in my grief journey. I'm also thankful I plugged into a couple of support groups because I found relief in the companionship and the non-judgmental understanding of those who've experienced a similar loss and are living with its repercussions. Knowledge feels empowering, so I've read countless books and listened to many podcasts on grief and loss. Taking in the stories of others who are surviving loss is a great inspiration. Sharing my own story, like I am here tonight, to compassionate listeners has been an important outlet for expressing myself and a way to wrestle some purpose out of the horror that's happened. I've discovered that my words can help others find connection, seek support, and pursue healing. I'm learning to better love and tenderly care for myself and cannot emphasize enough the important role that self-compassion has played in my grief story. The gentler and more accepting I am with myself about whatever feelings and thoughts I'm having, the easier I find they move through me and dissipate. I'm working to observe my thoughts with mindful awareness and trying to talk to myself in the same voice that I would speak to my best friend if she were going through something like I experienced. My self-compassion starts with just recognizing and allowing my suffering. I acknowledge the challenge I'm having, offer myself comfort and acceptance, not judgment or criticism, and allow my emotions without suppressing or magnifying them. Spending time with people in my tribe, doing things I enjoy, helps me so much, as do journaling, just letting my tears flow when they arise, getting massages, being in nature, supporting meaningful causes, and just reminding myself to say no when I need to. Self-care calms my overtaxed nervous system, allowing me to relax and helping me breathe, enabling me to manage my anxiety and feel more optimistic and grounded. In the face of my grief, I've been tempted to protect myself from the pain by shutting down, but I've come to realize that closing my heart to pain also shuts it off from experiencing love, joy, hope, and connection, the very things that soothe heartache and can transform suffering and trauma into growth. I could easily become harder and colder, but how would that benefit anyone, especially me? I'm choosing to become softer and warmer. As I begin to live again with more vulnerability and openness, I'm finding resilience and developing strength that I never knew I was capable of. And my baseline is not the same, but I'm creating a new normal for myself. I've become more empathetic and aware of the pain and struggle of others. I've developed a passion to help support other grievers, to do what I can to stop the shame and stigma of mental illness, and to help end suicide and abuse of all types. So, if you're grieving and looking for relief, I created Treasure Valley Grief Connection with you in mind. As I struggled to find good local resources for grief support, I realized others in the area must be having a hard time finding them too. So on July 4th, the 1-year marker of my loss, I launched my website, tvgriefconnection.com, where I compiled the results of all my hours of research to make it easier for all of us who need grief support to connect to resources, find the community we need to survive and thrive. The journey of grief is really difficult and different for each one of us. And I urge you to grieve at your own pace, give yourself grace and space, and ask for help along the way. I know that with every tear I cry and every time I share my story, I inch my way toward healing. I pray you find the strength to thrive as you work through your loss and grief, and I encourage you to practice small daily acts of self-care and compassion, take regular actions that guide you toward healing, and help you to remember the meaningful ways that your beloved person touched your life. I hope that you'll visit tvgriefconnection.com to find helpful resources and seek support through community, for it's our connectedness that can truly help us navigate the tangled web of grief and can propel us to live bigger, bolder, more loving, and fuller lives. So thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you a spark of hope. So may God truly bless you. Thanks.
Hey guys, give it up one more time for Sara Cobb. That was such an emotional story.